Well, hello again to one and all, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Charles Nathan, your friendly guide helping you to navigate the shadowy swamp that is the modern British state. Today we're going to take a quick look at the recent committee hearing of the Joint National Security Strategy Committee. Joint meaning it's composed of both members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Today it's looking specifically at foreign donations and foreign interference and influence in UK elections. This is of course in the wake of the Nathan Gill controversy, the ex-leader of Reform Wales having been convicted of accepting bribes from Russia for political influence. Now you're going to hear mostly from Graham Biggar, who's the Director General of the National Crime Agency, and here he is just giving a basic summary of his understanding of how things are working right now.
Ian Byrne.
Thanks, Chair Mr. Biggar. Let me just start off with a question about law and then a question about enforcement. So just to follow up the Chair's opening remarks, you're a patriot, you know the law, you know what our enemies are up to. In your professional judgment, where are the gaps in the law that allow our enemies to actually malignly interfere in a way we'd rather they didn't? What's your kind of take on that basic question?
No, thank you. So, I mean, I spent all of my career almost in the national security environment in one form or another, not all of it in law enforcement, so I absolutely do care, as you suggested. The main risk in terms of political funding is that money can come from overseas, and it is very easy to obfuscate that. As I said, the amount that we have managed to associate with foreign states at the moment, 0.1% over the last 8 years, is not high.
Well, you say that, but actually, when I add up what's on the electoral register over the last, 13 years, it's about $1 billion. So 0.1% is 10 million. Yeah. Actually, for most of us around the table, 10 million in a local election campaign is quite a lot of cash.
I was about to say but, and say almost exact. We'll say two things. One, a small amount of money can still make a significant difference, to your point, but also I don't have high confidence that that figure is right. It may well be higher. We know that foreign states have, and this is obviously straying into more MI5 territory, but we know they have the intent to try and disrupt our democracy. And we know they have the capability to move money across borders and into this country, and we have seen that in a number of other areas. So we should absolutely expect that they would try and do it here. Now, that doesn't mean that there is a massive amount of it happening that we are not aware of. We just don't know. I would be cautious about assuming. So I would absolutely not assume that the amount we know of is the total. I would be quite cautious about assuming that it is massively more than that. We don't know, but we have seen no indications, and I think we would see more indications if it was happening at an enormous scale. But just to your point as well, it doesn't matter if it's not at an enormous scale, it still matters.
So, good news then, at least as far as criminal action is concerned. There's really not that much going on, according to Graham Biggar of the National Crime Agency. And if anyone knows, it would surely be him. Of course, we do need to bear in mind, as he does indeed point out himself, that we are talking about the threshold for criminal investigation and prosecution. Because it's a criminal matter, the threshold needs to be quite high, and the criteria for starting and following through on an investigation needs to be quite cut and dry. When we get more into the world of things like influence peddling, things get a little bit murkier, but I'll let Mr. Biggar set out what's going on there for himself.
In the development of law, you have malign activity, which is nevertheless not criminal. To what extent do you use your intelligence capabilities to point out those malign activities to legislators to try and produce sensible answers?
We don't have a legal basis to collect merely for malign activity. I mean, we come across it, but our intelligence collection has to be based around a suspicion of criminal activity. Having done that, we absolutely find malign activity. I mean, we work hand in glove with MI5 and the Met Police and CT Police, and that is exactly what we have done in this area. That's why we have been lobbying internally for some years to get changes to PEPERA. But it's also Mr. Byrne's point about Companies House. It's why we have been lobbying for a number of years to the way that we deal with money laundering in this country. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine provided the prompt for 2 economic crime bills, which included a lot of the measures that we've been lobbying for the preceding 10 years, roughly, all of which together begin to tighten up a system which previously has been really quite lax. But it all needs to come together to be effective.
So there's Graham Bigger confirming that the National Crime Agency is aware of some areas which are less than desirable. That's things which are perhaps a little murky, but they don't reach the threshold for criminality. Reassuringly, though, he does tell us that, again, like the known criminal activity, it amounts to less than 0.1% of known party political funding. So that is surely a good thing. He does say, though, that even small amounts matter. But that got me to thinking. If small amounts matter, why is it that our establishment political parties raise millions and spend millions every year trying to convince us that their policies are good, sound and workable? And what's more, if small amounts matter and can move the political needle, how come these large political parties can't convince us of anything, no matter how big their budgets are? Something's not adding up there. And it's something we'll need to consider as we go forward and just have a little listen to the upcoming legislation, which is apparently designed to tighten some of this up. And this, I think, is where it starts getting more interesting.
Lord Arbuthnot.
Thank you. Mr. Bigger, coming back to the questions asked by Mr. Martin, you said that we needed to prove that someone knew that they were committing it. And also you've said that there aren't great grounds to investigate under the current legislation. Do you think the coming elections bill deals with that?
I hope so. If it goes in line with the policy that the government set out in July, which we had fed into, then it will be a very significant improvement on what we have now. So requiring know your donor checks by parties and politicians will be a kind of a massive step forward. Tidying up, reducing the threshold for unincorporated associations, and money can flow through those very easily at the moment, would help. Changing how money can come in from companies, and that will be something that personally I'll be looking at quite closely. The recommendation from the Committee for Standards for Public Life was that should be limited to the profits a company in the UK had made, the post-tax net profits. And there will be a question there about what threshold they set and whether it's revenue or profits. Section 54A, as we've talked about before, all of those things together should provide a much better basis than we have at the moment. But as we see the legislation published, we'll be looking, as I said to Mr. Martin, quite carefully at the way the legislation is phrased to think about how investigatable and prosecutable it will be.
That question of profits of a corporation, how easy would it be to game the system by, for example, paying consultancy fees to someone in the UK?
I think on that question and more broadly, determined actors will always find a way to get round whatever legislation we kind of put in place. There will always be something that people can do if they really want to. But by doing this, we'll be making it harder. We'll be adding more friction into the system. And that has got to be positive. You're also putting this duty onto political parties. They're going to have to be assessing the risk. So what we want to try and get is the right behaviour from party treasurers, so they are assessing that risk carefully. And when there's a donation coming through that is looking like it might be impermissible, that they would refuse it and report it to the Electoral-Commission. What needs to go alongside that is the right resourcing into the Electoral-Commission, which I know the government has committed to, and the building up of the skills and capabilities there to do it. And I know the Electoral-Commission gave evidence to you a few months ago. So all of that coming together can get us to a better place on this. But we will look closely at the bill when it comes out.
To sum up, let's get real. Hardly anyone here wants outside influences affecting the outcome of UK elections. But at the same time, I do wonder if the establishment is deliberately making a mountain out of what we now admittedly know is a molehill to further its own ends. Does that sound far-fetched? Does it sound like a conspiracy theory? Well, what would you have said if I told you 2 years ago that a duly elected British government would be using an obscure technicality to cancel local elections right across the country? Would you have believed me? So there's food for thought. Also, the idea of 16-year-olds voting has been mooted since day one of this admittedly unpopular Labour government. Now, I wonder if that's something that's going to appear in this new bill when it finally arrives later this year. I guess we'll find out when it's finally published. In the end, I simply don't trust the establishment not to try to turn the Electoral-commission into its own personal attack dog and gatekeeper. We know that the uniparty consensus is failing spectacularly, and given what we've seen so far, I would not put any measure beyond them in order to try to preserve their position and authority. We'll have a look at the bill when it's published, but I think there might be some unpleasant surprises in it. I hope I'm wrong. Anyway, that's it for now. As always, please like, share, subscribe, comment, do all this cool stuff. It really helps new channels like this to grow, and it helps to keep independent voices out there and free on the internet. Because always remember, our ignorance is their power. See you next time. Bye bye.